When my 12-year-old daughter came home trembling, clutching her gym bag like a lifeline, I thought she'd been bullied. But when she whispered, "Mom, there are cameras in our locker room," my world stopped. Before that day, life had been ordinary in all the quiet, comforting ways that made you believe bad things happened somewhere else. We lived in a small Oregon town where the loudest scandal was a dog biting a mailman. I was a nurse at the local clinic, my husband Owen managed a car dealership, and our daughter Lily was the bright, artistic type who painted the sky purple because, as she once told me, blue is too predictable. Our mornings were ritualistic. Cereal for Lily, coffee for me, silence for Owen until his second cup. We weren't perfect, but we were fine. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The first cracks started small. Lily came home quiet after gym class, sometimes skipping her after-school art club. I thought it was typical preteen moodiness. Owen said I was overreacting, that kids get weird at that age. Then, one evening, I found her sitting on the bathroom floor, crying silently into her towel. I knelt beside her, brushing back her damp hair. "Hey," I whispered. "What happened?" She looked up at me, eyes red. "Mom," she said softly, "you'll think I'm crazy." I smiled, trying to steady her. "You're not crazy. Talk to me." She hesitated, then pointed toward her gym bag. "There's something wrong at school." Inside, she had stuffed her PE uniform, shoes, and something wrapped in a paper towel. When I unwrapped it, I froze. It was a small black device, no bigger than a lighter, with a tiny blinking red light. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "In the locker room," she said, trembling. "It was taped under the bench. I think there are more." I saw wires, but I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was part of the school's security system, or some forgotten piece of tech equipment. But deep down, I already knew better. I drove to the school the next morning, device in hand. The building looked as innocent as ever. Bright murals, kids laughing, teachers greeting each other. The principal, Mrs. Bennett, a woman with immaculate hair and an unshakable smile, ushered me into her office. When I placed the device on her desk, she blinked, then frowned as if I'd handed her a broken pen. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "In the girls' locker room," I said. "My daughter found it." Her smile flickered for half a second before she replaced it with practiced calm. "That's concerning," she said. "But I'm sure there's an explanation. Probably a misplaced security sensor from the renovations." I didn't believe her. I'd seen the fear in Lily's eyes. "Could we check the locker room together?" I pressed. She hesitated, then said, "Of course. I'll have the janitor meet us there after lunch." But when I returned that afternoon, the janitor was gone, and Mrs. Bennett claimed they had already checked everything and found nothing unusual. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. She was too quick. Too sure. That night, Lily refused to go to school. She said she felt watched. At first, I thought it was paranoia, until I found another small black device in her gym shoe, one that hadn't been there the night before. I confronted Owen, expecting outrage, but instead, he frowned. "You're letting her imagination run wild," he said. "You'll freak her out more if you keep feeding into this." "Feeding into what?" I snapped. "She found cameras where she changes clothes, Owen. That's not imagination." He rubbed his temples, sighing. "Maybe it's a prank. Teenagers do dumb things." But when I looked at Lily, curled up on the couch, hugging her knees, I knew this wasn't a prank. Something was very wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything, the blinking light, Mrs. Bennett's fake calm, Owen's dismissive tone. Around midnight, I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and drove back to the school. The gate was unlocked. The hallways smelled like disinfectant and silence. When I reached the girls' locker room, my heart hammered so hard I thought it might echo off the tiles. I crouched near the benches, lifted one of the wooden slats, and saw them. Not one, but 3 small cameras, neatly wired to a hidden router taped under the frame. For a moment, I just stared. Then I took out my phone and snapped photos, shaking so badly the images blurred. That's when I heard footsteps. They were slow, confident. Someone else was in the locker room. I turned off my flashlight, crouched behind a row of lockers, holding my breath. A shadow stretched across the floor. Keys jingled. The janitor. But he wasn't cleaning. He was kneeling beside the bench, checking the cameras. And smiling. My blood turned to ice. When he stood and turned off the light on one of the devices, I saw his reflection in the mirror. Calm, practiced, routine. Like he'd done it 100 times before. I backed away, heart in my throat, until I reached the door. Then I ran. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. I didn't go to the police that night. I should have. But I didn't. Because as I sat there in the dark, trembling, I saw something in the rearview mirror that made my stomach drop. The janitor was standing at the school gate, watching me leave. And he was smiling. By morning, I had convinced myself that I'd imagined it all. The cameras, the janitor's smile, the way he'd watched me leave. Sleep deprivation, panic, motherly paranoia, those were easier explanations than the truth. But when I plugged my phone into the charger and scrolled through the photos I'd taken, there they were, clear *TS of the cameras, the wiring, even the reflection of his face in the mirror. I drove straight to the police station. The officer at the front desk was polite in the way people are when they think you're exaggerating. He took my statement, glanced at the pictures, and said, "We'll send someone to check it out, ma'am." That was it. No urgency, no alarm. "Those cameras were in a middle school locker room," I said sharply. "Those are children." He sighed. "I understand, ma'am. But if it's a misunderstanding, we don't want to cause panic." A misunderstanding. That word burned. I went home furious. Owen met me at the door, arms crossed. "You went to the police?" he asked, voice tight. "Of course I did," I snapped. "What was I supposed to do? Pretend it didn't happen?" He shook his head. "You should have told me first." I tried. "You didn't listen." He didn't respond, just walked away, muttering something about how I always overreact. That night, I barely slept. Every time a car passed outside, I thought it was someone watching us. I kept replaying the janitor's face in my head, that faint smirk that said, "I know something you don't." 2 days later, the police called. "The locker room's clean," the detective said. "No hidden devices. We checked thoroughly." I almost dropped the phone. "That's impossible. I have pictures." "Then you must have mistaken what you saw. There's nothing there now." Now. That word stuck with me. After I hung up, I called Mrs. Bennett again. She sounded oddly cheerful. "Oh, I heard about your visit from the police. I'm so glad they cleared it up. I knew it was just a misunderstanding." Her voice was syrupy, rehearsed. And beneath that sugar, I heard something cold, relief. That evening, I decided to drive past the school again, just to see. It was Sunday. The parking lot was empty except for one car, an old white van I didn't recognize. Its engine was off, but the faint glow of a phone lit up the driver's seat. And sitting there was the janitor. I froze, hand hovering over my phone. Call the police? Call Owen? But before I could decide, the van's headlights flicked on, just once, like a warning. I drove away. The next morning, Lily's teacher called. "She's been distracted," she said gently. "Nervous. Jumping at noises." I was wondering if something's wrong at home. I wanted to scream. Something's wrong at school. Instead, I thanked her and hung up. That evening, Lily sat at the kitchen table, sketching. I noticed her hand trembling slightly, the pencil dragging uneven lines across the paper. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "has anyone talked to you about what you found?" She shook her head. "No one believes me." "Did anyone ask you to keep quiet?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide, terrified. Then she whispered, "Mrs. Bennett told me not to make trouble." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What exactly did she say?" "That sometimes people misunderstand technology," Lily murmured. "That it's better not to repeat things that could hurt the school's reputation." The way she said it, like she was repeating something memorized, made my skin crawl. That night, Owen confronted me again. "You're scaring her," he said. "Lily's not sleeping, she's jumpy, and now she's drawing cameras in her notebooks. This obsession isn't healthy." "Obsession," I said bitterly. "You think I want this to be real?" He rubbed his face, exhausted. "I think you need help." That broke something inside me. The next day, I went back to the police station with printed copies of the photos and a written statement. The same officer looked at them, then frowned. "These were deleted from our system," he said. "What?" He turned his screen toward me. The report from 2 days ago was gone. Erased. When I demanded to know why, he said, "It must have been archived incorrectly." But I knew. Someone didn't want a record. When I walked out of the station, a gray sedan was parked across the street. The janitor sat inside, sipping coffee, watching me. I pretended not to see him and kept walking. That night, I woke up to the sound of Lily screaming. I ran into her room, heart pounding. She was sitting up, drenched in sweat. "Mom, I saw someone outside my window," she sobbed. I rushed to the window. The backyard was dark, still. But the grass was flattened, like someone had been standing there. Owen called it a nightmare. But when I checked the security footage from our doorbell camera, the last hour was missing, wiped clean. I stared at the blank timeline, my reflection pale in the screen. Someone was watching us. And now, they weren't hiding it. The following week felt like being trapped inside someone else's nightmare. Every morning I woke up praying that things would return to normal, that Lily would laugh again, that the police would call, that I'd discover this had all been some elaborate misunderstanding. But each day only proved how deep it went. It started with whispers. Parents at the school stopped making eye contact. Conversations hushed when I walked into the hallway. I overheard one mother say, "She's the one who thinks there are cameras," in the same tone people reserve for the word crazy. Mrs. Bennet stopped answering my emails. When I called, her secretary claimed she was in back-to-back meetings. Even Lily's favorite teacher, Ms. Harris, started keeping her distance, smiling too politely, too nervously. I felt it every time I stepped onto school grounds, the tension, the silent message, "You're not welcome here." At home, things weren't better. Owen had become a stranger. He buried himself in work, left early, came home late. When he was around, we barely spoke. Once, during dinner, he set down his fork and said, "You have to stop, Emma. You're turning this house into a war zone." "There is a war," I said. "You just refuse to see it." He looked at me for a long moment, eyes tired, then whispered, "Maybe because you're the one fighting ghosts." That night, he slept on the couch. Lily started missing school. Some mornings she'd sit on her bed, fully dressed, shoes on, but frozen, like the thought of stepping into that building was unbearable. I called the school counselor. She promised to look into it, but her tone was the same syrupy one Mrs. Bennet used, the voice people use when they're just waiting for you to calm down or go away. Then things escalated. One afternoon, I came home early from a double shift at the clinic. The living room curtains were half drawn, the air too still. On the coffee table sat an envelope with no return address. Inside were 4 printed photos. Each one showed our house, our street, our backyard. The last one was taken through Lily's bedroom window. I ran outside, scanning the street, but it was empty, only the faint hum of distant traffic and the flutter of the mailbox door still swinging. When Owen came home, I showed him the photos. His face drained of color, but instead of anger, he just whispered, "This has gone too far." "You think I did this?" I shouted. "I think you need to stop making enemies, Emma," he yelled back. "You're provoking someone." The words hung between us like poison. That night, I slept in Lily's room, sitting in the chair by her bed, watching the window until sunrise. The next morning, I went to the police again, new evidence in hand. This time, a different detective met me. His nameplate read, Detective Ward. He listened quietly as I spoke, his eyes scanning the photos. When I finished, he sighed. "I believe you," he said finally. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered. "Then you'll investigate?" He nodded slowly. "I'll look into the janitor. But you need to be careful. Things like this don't stay buried for long." I left feeling lighter, but by evening, that hope turned to ash. Because when I went to pick Lily up from school, the janitor's van was gone, and so was he. According to Mrs. Bennet, he had resigned suddenly and relocated out of state. No forwarding address, no background check, no file, just gone. When I told Detective Ward, he looked genuinely surprised. "That's not possible," he muttered. "We hadn't even contacted him yet." He promised to follow up, but days passed. No calls, no updates. Then suddenly, he stopped answering his phone too. The silence was suffocating. I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Small, quiet wrongs that felt like messages. My car alarm going off at 3 a.m., even though I'd locked it. The back gate left open. The faint click of the phone line when I picked it up. One evening, I came home to find the front door slightly ajar. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, gripping my keys like a wee *P***N. The house was empty, but every picture frame had been turned face down. No one else had a key except Owen. When I confronted him, he swore he had nothing to do with it. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. A few days later, I caught him on the phone in the garage, whispering, "She's losing it. Yes, I've tried. But she won't stop." When I stepped inside, he jumped. "It's work," he lied. I didn't argue. I just nodded, walked back inside, and locked the bedroom door. I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I didn't trust my own husband anymore. Lily was the only reason I was holding it together. But even she was changing. She'd grown quieter, sharper somehow. When I asked what she was thinking, she'd say, "We can't trust anyone, Mom." One night, I found her sitting on the floor with her tablet, scrolling through school photos, mapping the gym layout like she was preparing for something. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. "Finding out who knew," she said. "Someone had to set them up. Someone else had to protect them." Her voice was steady, too steady for a 12-year-old. I wanted to tell her to stop, to let me handle it. But deep down, I knew I couldn't handle anything anymore. Then came the phone call that shattered what little was left of normal. It was the school counselor. Her voice was shaking. "I thought you should know," she said. Lily's locker was vandalized today. Someone carved liar across the door. For a long time, I couldn't speak. My throat closed, rage and terror blending into something cold. When I got to the school, Lily was sitting in the hallway, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the floor. The word on her locker burned red in the fluorescent light, angry, jagged letters, carved deep. Mrs. Bennet stood nearby, pretending to console her. "Children can be cruel," she said softly. "We'll repaint it tomorrow." I turned to her. "You did this," I hissed. "You let this happen." Her expression didn't change. "I suggest you calm down before you make more trouble for your daughter." Something inside me snapped. I took Lily's hand and walked her out of the building, ignoring the whispers that followed us. As we reached the car, Lily looked up at me and said quietly, "They're not going to stop, are they?" I gripped the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead. "No," I said. "But neither am I." That was the moment I stopped being afraid and started fighting back. The night after the locker incident, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching headlights drift past our street like ghosts. Every sound made me flinch, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the faint rustle of wind against the siding. Owen had stopped coming home altogether. He texted once, "I need time. You need help." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching her stuffed fox, the same one she'd had since kindergarten. I tucked a blanket around her and whispered a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'll fix this." Around midnight, my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, low and strained. "You need to stop looking into the cameras." My pulse spiked. "Who is this?" Silence. Then a whisper. "They're watching you too." The line went dead. I tried to call back. No signal. The message wasn't there. It was as if the call had never happened. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a pervert with a hidden camera. It was bigger. Organized. Protected. The next morning, I drove to the school with a plan. I told myself I was just going to talk to Mrs. Bennet, but in truth, I was done talking. I wanted answers. When I arrived, the office secretary said Mrs. Bennet was out for the day. I didn't believe her. I walked down the hall anyway, ignoring the secretary's protests. Her office door was locked. But through the frosted glass, I saw movement, a shadow crossing the room. I knocked once. "Mrs. Bennet?" No answer. I turned the handle. It clicked open easily. She was standing by her desk, hurriedly stuffing files into a cardboard box. When she saw me, she froze. "Emma," she said tightly. "You can't be in here." I stepped closer. "Where's the janitor?" She blinked, pretending confusion. "He resigned." "I told you." "No. You moved him. You knew what he was doing, and you protected him." Her jaw clenched. "You need to leave before I call security." I glanced at the papers she was packing, manila folders labeled maintenance contracts and security system upgrade. One slipped from her hands and hit the floor, spilling documents across the carpet. As she bent to pick them up, I caught a glimpse of something that froze me in place, an invoice from a private company called Nordex Solutions. The service listed, camera installation and network access configuration. Date, 3 weeks before Lily found the first device. Mrs. Bennet snatched the paper back, shoving it into the box. "Those are confidential." "Nordex Solutions?" I said slowly. "You hired them." Her voice sharpened. "It was part of the district's modernization initiative. Everything was approved." "Approved to film children changing their clothes?" She flinched. "That's not what those cameras were for." "Then what were they for?" I demanded. Her silence was answer enough. Before I could press further, someone appeared in the doorway, a tall man in a dark suit, unfamiliar but instantly threatening. He had a district ID clipped to his jacket. "Mrs. Bennet," he said evenly, "is there a problem?" She straightened immediately. "No, Mr. Clark. Just a parent who's leaving." He smiled. Cold, polite, and entirely wrong. "Mrs. Carson, isn't it? I understand your concern, but perhaps we can discuss this in a more appropriate setting." The way he said it made my stomach twist. "I'm fine right here," I said. He took a step closer. "The district appreciates your vigilance, but spreading misinformation could have serious consequences. For you. For your daughter." That last part wasn't a warning. It was a threat. I grabbed my bag and left before I said something that would get me arrested. Once outside, I sat in my car, hands trembling, replaying his words. "For your daughter." I looked up the company name on my phone. Nordex Solutions. The website looked professional, corporate buzzwords about school safety and surveillance modernization. But when I clicked their About Us page, it was blank. No names. No addresses. Just an email contact form. I tried to dig deeper. Every link led nowhere. Every search result looped back to the same generic homepage. Later that night, I texted Detective Ward. "Do you know anything about Nordex Solutions?" He replied a minute later, "Don't text this number again." That's when I knew he wasn't gone. He'd been silenced. I didn't tell Lily any of this. She was already on edge, her drawings growing darker, filled with faceless silhouettes and eyes hidden behind walls. But the more I kept from her, the more she noticed. "You're scared," she said one night, watching me pace. "I'm fine," I lied. "You're lying." I met her gaze, realizing she'd learned to read fear the way most kids read books. The next day, she didn't come home from school. I called the office, no answer. I called her friends. None had seen her since lunch. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I drove like a maniac, heart hammering against my ribs. The sun was setting when I pulled into the school parking lot. It was empty except for one car, Mrs. Bennett's. I ran to the main entrance, banging on the locked doors. "Lily." No answer. Then through the glass I saw her, standing in the hallway near the gym, pale and frozen. When she saw me, she lifted her hand and pointed to the locker room door. I sprinted inside. The smell of chlorine and sweat hit me like a wave. The lights flickered overhead. The locker room was empty, except for one bench, half torn apart, wires spilling out like veins. And beside it, a laptop, screen glowing. On it played a live feed. Not just one camera. Dozens. Every locker room. Every hallway. Every classroom. I stared in horror. Some feeds were clearly labeled with student names. Others had timestamps going back months. Then a voice behind me said, "You shouldn't be here." I turned. Mr. Clark stood in the doorway, calm, composed, as if he'd expected me. "What is this?" I demanded. "You're spying on children." He tilted his head. "You misunderstand. This is a district-wide monitoring system. For safety." I pointed to one of the screens, a girl in a towel, unaware she was being recorded. "Safety? That's illegal." He sighed. "Parents signed the consent forms. Buried in the fine print. You'd be amazed what people agree to when they don't read what they sign." My blood went cold. "You're lying." He smiled faintly. "Am I?" Then he stepped closer. "You need to stop digging, Mrs. Carson. For your own good. And for Lily's." I backed away, grabbing the laptop and bolting out the side door. My heart thundered as I ran to my car, half expecting him to follow. He didn't. He didn't have to. Because when I turned on the ignition, the dashboard lit up, and a voice from the radio whispered, "We warned you, Emma." When I got home that night with the stolen laptop on the passenger seat, my hands were still shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. Lily sat on the couch waiting, knees pulled to her chest, eyes darting to the window every time a car passed. She didn't even ask where I'd been, she just looked at me like she already knew. I set the laptop on the kitchen table, shut the curtains, and whispered, "We're not victims anymore." She stared at the screen as the feeds loaded. Dozens of tiny boxes lit up, hallways, locker rooms, even a teacher's lounge. Timestamps ran in neat rows down the edge, stretching back months. Lily's voice was a thin thread. "They were watching all of us." I nodded. "And now we're going to make sure the whole world sees." It took me hours to copy everything to an external drive. Each file was a fragment of someone's childhood stolen, cataloged, commodified. I wanted to cry, to scream, to burn the entire school down. Instead, I kept my hands steady, naming folders, encrypting backups, like a nurse in an operating room. At 2 in the morning, I called a number I hadn't used in years. "Caitlin," I whispered when she answered groggily. "It's Emma. I need help." She was an old college friend, now an investigative journalist in Portland. We hadn't spoken in almost a decade, but when I described the cameras, the missing janitor, the silent police, she went quiet. "Send me a sample," she said finally. "If it's real, I'll drive down tonight." An hour later she was in my kitchen, hair in a messy bun, laptop already open. She scrolled through the footage, her expression hardening. "Jesus, Emma," she muttered. "This is systemic. This isn't just a creep with a key." "I know," I said. "But no one will listen." She looked up. "Then we'll make them listen." We built a plan on the kitchen table between mugs of cold coffee. Caitlin would verify and timestamp the files, mirror them to multiple secure servers. She had a contact at a national outlet who specialized in child exploitation cases. We would leak everything at once. Footage, invoices, names, even the consent forms parents had been tricked into signing. But first we needed proof that Nordex Solutions and the district were still actively recording. Caitlin suggested a sting. Plant a decoy, force their system to update, then capture the data in real time. Lily, sitting quietly until now, said, "I can do it." "No," I snapped instantly. You're not bait. She met my eyes with a steadiness that scared me. I'm already in all their files, Mom. They already have me. Caitlin intervened gently. We can do this without putting her at risk. I'll pose as a substitute teacher, access their network from the inside. Reluctantly, I agreed. For the next 3 days our house became a war room. Caitlin wrote code, Lily mapped out camera locations from memory, and I gathered every document I could find. Invoices, *TS, even the threatening letter from the anonymous caller. I drove to the district office under the guise of requesting Lily's records and secretly photographed a storage room full of Nordex-branded routers. Each night I expected a knock at the door. Each morning I was surprised we were still free. Then, on the 4th day, Caitlin came back from the school with a thumb drive. She plugged it into her laptop and up popped a live dashboard. Usernames, IP addresses, hidden admin controls. She'd captured the entire back end. They've been streaming this to an offshore server, she whispered. Looks like someone's selling access. My stomach turned. Selling. She nodded grimly. Not just voyeurism. Blackmail. Extortion. Maybe worse. The final piece fell into place when Lily handed me a crumpled envelope she'd found in her locker that morning. Inside was a printed photo, a still from one of the camera feeds, showing me and Caitlin sitting at our kitchen table. Across the bottom, in bold red letters, stop. I felt the blood drain from my face. They're in our house. We tore the place apart. In the smoke detector above the kitchen we found it, a pinhole lens, disguised as a screw. Another in the hallway thermostat. A third in the light fixture of Lily's room. I smashed each one with a hammer, hands shaking. Caitlin quietly slid the wrecked pieces into a bag. Now we really have them, she said. Wiretapping. Illegal surveillance. Across state lines. This is federal now. But I knew the moment we went public, they'd come for us. We had to choose the right time and place, somewhere we couldn't be silenced, where the footage would go live before anyone could shut it down. Caitlin suggested the upcoming school board meeting. It's public. Media will be there. We can hijack their projector and stream everything. I hesitated. If we do this, there's no going back. Lily stood straighter than I'd ever seen her. Then don't look back. That night I wrote a statement, not as a nurse or a wife or even a mother, but as a witness. I described everything, the first camera, the janitor, the threats, the erased reports. My hands cramped, but I kept writing until dawn. When I was done, Lily took the pages from me, folded them carefully, and whispered, "We're going to end this." For the first time in weeks, I believed her. The school board meeting was set for a Thursday evening at 7. For 3 days before that, I lived in a state of electric tension, moving through the motions of work and meals as if I were wearing someone else's skin. At night Caitlin and I rehearsed every step. How we'd plug her laptop into the board's projector, how the files were mirrored to multiple servers, how once she hit play, there would be no way to pull it back. Lily sat with us, silent, eyes bright with a mixture of fear and anticipation. On the day of the meeting, the town hall auditorium was already crowded. Parents stood shoulder to shoulder, fanning themselves with printed agendas. Teachers sat stiffly in the back rows. Cameras from the local news station glinted like insects. On stage, the board members whispered to one another, papers shuffling. Mrs. Bennet sat in the second row near the aisle, lips pressed thin. Mr. Clark hovered by the side door, dark suit immaculate, scanning the crowd with predator calm. Caitlin wore a blazer over a plain blouse. To anyone else she looked like a substitute teacher carrying a laptop bag. I had dressed in my plainest clothes, trying to look like just another anxious parent. Lily, against my protests, insisted on coming. She sat 2 rows behind me, hood pulled over her head, hands hidden in her sleeves. The meeting began with mundane business, budget approvals, field trip schedules. My pulse pounded louder with each passing minute. At exactly 7:28, Caitlin caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. I stood up. "My name is Emma Carson," I said, my voice carrying further than I expected. "And before you move on to the next item, I need to show you something." Heads turned. The board chair frowned. "Ma'am, public comment is later. This can't wait," I said. My hands were steady as Caitlin walked to the projector cart, knelt, and connected a cable to her laptop. The screen behind the board flickered, the district's logo vanishing. In its place appeared a grid of video feeds, hallways, classrooms, locker rooms. Gasps rippled through the room. Caitlin clicked a folder. Time-stamped clips filled the screen. Children changing, girls in towels, boys pulling on shirts. A murmur rose like a wave, swelling into shouts. "This is what's been happening under your noses," I said, my voice hard. "Hidden cameras installed by a company called Nordex Solutions under contract with this district. Protected by your administrators. My daughter found one of them. We have invoices, consent forms, network logs, and live feeds streamed to offshore servers. Look." Caitlin hit play on a video showing a cursor moving through an admin dashboard, a list of usernames, IP addresses, bank accounts. She had blurred the children's faces but left everything else visible. On another screen, the Nordex invoice appeared with Mrs. Bennet's signature. The board chair sh*t to his feet. Turn that off. This is illegal. What's illegal is what you allowed, I cut in. And the files are already mirrored to federal authorities and 3 newsrooms. Shutting off the projector won't erase your crimes. Chaos erupted. Parents surged forward, shouting questions. Reporters lifted cameras, shouting for statements. A father near the aisle grabbed his phone and began live streaming. On stage, Mrs. Bennet's face had gone chalk white. Mr. Clark moved toward Caitlin, but a cluster of parents blocked his path. Then the doors at the back opened and 2 uniformed officers walked in, not the local police, but state investigators. One of them spoke into a radio while the other moved straight toward Mr. Clark. You're under arrest for obstruction and illegal surveillance, he said calmly. Mr. Clark tried to push past him, but another officer stepped in. Handcuffs clicked. Mrs. Bennet started shouting about misunderstanding and policy compliance, but her words drowned under the roar of the crowd. I found Lily in the second row. She was standing now, breathing fast but steady, watching as the men who had threatened her were led away. When she saw me, she managed a small, fierce smile. Caitlin unplugged her laptop and slipped it back into her bag. It's done, she whispered. But it wasn't quite done. As the officers escorted Mr. Clark out, he turned his head toward me and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "You've made powerful enemies." I met his eyes without blinking. So have you. Outside, the evening air was cold and electric with sirens. Parents clustered in small groups, crying, yelling, calling relatives. Reporters shoved microphones at me, shouting questions. I held Lily's hand and kept walking until we reached the car. Only when the doors were shut did I finally exhale. In the passenger seat, Lily stared at the dash. Are we safe now? She asked. I started the engine. Safer than we were yesterday, I said honestly. But this isn't over. She looked out the window at the flashing lights reflected in the school's glass doors. At least now they know. Yes, I said. Now they know. That night at home we sat at the kitchen table, Caitlin typing furiously, forwarding files to federal contacts, setting up interviews. The laptop between us was still warm from the projector. Every time a new email notification popped up, a news outlet responding, a lawyer offering representation, a little of the weight on my chest lifted. I glanced at Lily, curled up on the couch under a blanket, eyes half closed but awake. We did it, I whispered to Caitlin. We started it, she corrected softly. Now we make sure it sticks. I looked at my daughter and for the first time in weeks felt something other than fear, not relief exactly, but a hard, clean determination. We had stopped being victims. We had forced the truth into the light, and no one could put it back in the dark again. The week after the meeting felt like standing in the middle of a storm after the thunder has already struck. News vans lined our street. Reporters knocked at the door at all hours. Strangers left flowers on the porch, letters in the mailbox, and sometimes hateful notes calling me a liar or an attention seeker. I turned off my phone and drew the curtains, but the world outside would not quiet down. Caitlin stayed with us through the first few days. Her phone never stopped ringing. Producers, editors, lawyers, federal agents. The files she released spread across every major outlet in the country. The headlines read, "Small Town School Caught in National Scandal," and "Nordex Solutions Under Federal Investigation." The morning after the story broke, Mrs. Bennet and several district officials were arrested for conspiracy and child endangerment. Mr. Clark was charged with racketeering and money laundering after investigators traced millions to a shell company offshore. The janitor was found in another state under a different name. The FBI brought him back in handcuffs. It was all over the news, yet none of it felt real. Lily stayed home from school, curled on the couch, sketching. She drew everything, the hallways, the cameras, even the projector screen from that night. Her drawings were sharper now, deliberate, not afraid of shadows. When I looked over her shoulder, she said, "I have to remember what they did. If I forget, they win." I nodded. "Then we'll remember together." Caitlin finally left for Portland to work on a documentary, but before she drove off, she hugged me and whispered, "Don't let them turn you into a symbol. Just keep being her mother." I tried. The investigations dragged on for months. I testified before a grand jury in a sterile room with microphones and fluorescent lights that buzzed like bees. Lawyers asked questions that made my skin crawl. Every time they said, "Your daughter," I felt the need to shield her, even from their words. Owen reappeared once, at the courthouse. He looked smaller somehow, hollow-eyed. He said he'd been ashamed for not believing me. I wanted to forgive him, but forgiveness felt like a luxury we couldn't afford. He left before I found an answer. By spring, the town had changed. The school board was dissolved. A new principal was appointed, someone from out of state who promised transparency and healing. But parents still whispered, and children still flinched at the sight of security cameras. Trust doesn't return with an announcement, it seeps back slowly, if at all. Lily started therapy twice a week. At first she barely spoke, but one afternoon she came home and said, "I told Dr. Lee that I'm not scared anymore. Just angry." Her voice was calm, steady. For a 12-year-old, she sounded ancient. We moved to a small rental near the coast. I found work at a community clinic part-time, enough to keep us steady. At night the ocean's hum filled the silence that used to keep me awake. Lily joined an art program. Her paintings were darker than the other kids, but the teachers called them powerful. Every few weeks Caitlin sent updates, indictments, lawsuits, federal oversight committees forming. Each message ended the same way: "You did the right thing." Sometimes I believed her. Sometimes I didn't. There were still moments when I'd wake before dawn and think I heard the soft mechanical click of a hidden lens. My heart would race until I realized it was only the fridge settling, the house breathing. Trauma has a way of teaching your body to listen for ghosts. One evening, months later, Lily handed me a small canvas. On it she had painted a woman and a child standing on a beach at dusk. The woman was holding a flashlight. The beam stretched into the dark water, illuminating something half buried beneath the waves, small, metallic, glinting. "It's called After They Fell," she said. I traced the brushstrokes and asked, "Do you think it's over?" She thought for a moment. "I think we stopped them. But things like that never really end. They just change faces." I hung the painting above the mantel. Every morning, when the light from the window hit it, the flashlight's beam glimmered like something alive. Sometimes people call me brave. They say I exposed evil, that I saved children. But that's not the truth I live with. I didn't feel brave that night. I felt cornered, terrified, desperate. What I did wasn't courage. It was survival. The world still feels different now, stripped of the comforting illusion that safety is guaranteed. Yet, as I watch Lily laugh again, sunlight tangled in her hair, I know we've begged *N to heal, not by forgetting, but by refusing to stay silent. Because monsters thrive in silence. And we learned how to make noise.